My name is Lemn Sissay. I spent 18 years in the care system, and I think that the most you can see the effect of your time in care in your adult life, not when you're in care, actually. That's only your reactions to it, your surviving of it, and living with our childhoods like anybody does. But it's your adult life when you actually when its effect takes place. We need to have more expected of us because we've got so much to give, just like any child has. But a child who is in such a stressful situation, actually, as being away from home, away from family, for whatever reason, they're employing skills which could be used in any given environment, and education is just one of them, you know, skills of empathy, skills of learning, etc., learning to be able to live outside of conditions that most people wouldn't be able to survive in, or wouldn't be able to dream of having to survive in.
I
Um,
agree so much with that. And as someone who does volunteering and who works with young people, because I not only see what I am capable of giving to others, but also seeing the benefits of it. It just like, well, it is hard to be a care experienced young person. It's also just like it makes us so powerful and so much more than what we could ever think of.
we start our education from the day we're born, and from learning that first word or learning how to walk through watching others, etc., etc. It's not mimicry, it's education. We're learning. And that continues to school, and to school and to college and to university. So there is a definite relationship between going to school and being in family. The two are not two separate, distinct uh, entities unrelated to each other. They are, in fact, incredibly related. The act of learning is about relationships. So it's no surprise that when trouble happens at home, it then affects schooling. Why wouldn't it? It's learning is about relationships. We don't stop learning once we've left university. It continues forever. Education, formal education, and informal education are crucial to the development of a person and to their own sense of standing, self-esteem actually as well can come from not through getting degrees, but through being worth being heard. I always love speaking in class to the teacher, to questioning their ideas. May not have been the right thing to do, but to be heard, to be listened to have relevance, to feel that I am equal to the person next to me, that my point of view may be different, but it's equal. I mean, these are incredibly empowering things to take into the inside of oneself. Can I just say something about education? Because people that always think of it as the degree or the college or the blah. I respect the person who can just put their hand on a car and hear it, ticking over and know what the problem is. You know, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter if my degree is in literature or if I'm the top poet in England or what have you. I'm not, by the way, there's many other better than me. But if the bin man is not taking the bins outside, we're on the edge of a pandemic because of the illness that spreads and from the stuff that happens to the bins, to the rubbish, to the refuse. So if that's not done, now if I don't write a poem, nobody died. If they don't shift the bins, somebody's going to die. So there's not. I don't believe that there is a hierarchy in the jobs that you do. We are equal. Myself and the person who's taking out the bins and the car mechanic and the etc. etc. and the doctor equal to the artist. Work that one out. In this way, a person is not less if they're serving you at the supermarket than you are. It's really important that because as kids in care, we were always seen as the bottom rung in the school. We were the ones who were going to cause a problem. We were the ones who were going to be a threat to the status quo. Well, yeah, do you know what? We deserve to be a threat to the status quo because our entire status quo has been blown to pieces. But we don't. By the way, we're not a threat to the status quo. So I think there are things that we learn as people who are in care that we can look out at society and see inequalities and think, no, that happened to me as a child. I'm not going to continue that behavior in society. And then we look at people who were fostered and in care who are in our culture. And I've said before, Harry Potter was a foster child, Superman was adopted, etc. And look at how they look at society. And they try to say, no, this is wrong. Lyra Belacqua from Philip Pullman's Northern Lights series. There's so many. But look at how they look out at society and try to make things better for people because of what happened to them. We are, honestly, like we are a force for good. My advice is, especially if you're in your teens and you're getting ready to go out, is buy property.
Mm.
Remember that I said that. Buy property. Okay, remember, because nobody ever told me to buy property when I was a kid. Nobody ever thought of me as somebody who would buy my own flat. So it didn't get said. It's like nobody physically hugged me. You
Mm.
know, what was worse is they didn't acknowledge that not hugging me would have a detrimental effect on me. They didn't acknowledge that not telling me to buy property would actually mean that I never knew about it. Whereas children inside families do know about it because it's part of the nature of the growth of many, many families. So buy property. And also it means that you're worth buying property for. I mean, not that you're worth. It means that the person who's saying it believes that you can do it. That's the key.
Mm. I think you would actually appreciate this, but I one of my biggest mottos in life is thriving, not just surviving, because yeah, and like I feel like we're always, as care experienced young people, we're in survival mode, and we just like we want, but we can't see past our current experience. And so, one of the biggest things I do is thriving, not just surviving. And a lot of people have actually taken that on this year, and they've called this year 2020 Thrive, not just 2025. So it's it's great to see
Oh,
that people
nice.
yeah, it's great to see that people are actually thinking about thriving and not just surviving, and like doing more than what they can see possible.
Empathize would be the word I would want people to use when thinking about children in care. Empathy. Pity seems to me to relate to a sort of Victorian idea of charity. And one of the problems with a particular strain of thought regarding charity is that the person who is pitying separates themselves from the person they are pitying. And the more they pity the person, the further away they are from them.
Mm. Mm.
And and so is the pity serving to distance themselves from the person they're pitying, or is it serving to close that gap? And I think there's a certain kind of pity which serves to distance itself. Okay. Empathy is where you somehow can see how any of us could find ourselves, this is what I think anyway, any of us could find ourselves in the situation. You know, the care system isn't far from any of us. I genuinely mean that. If you go, most people, if you go back to their families and they go back to their grandparents and their grandparents' grandparents and their grandparents, you'll find a foster child. Okay? You'll find, and I know who I'm speaking with here by speaking to you in Australia, but you will find people inside your own family tree who were fostered, who were without parents, who were orphaned. You know, so we're not far away from anybody. So it's not pity that we need. It is, I mean, I've said it before, but is respect.
Mm.
Um, but I think that empathy is the human trait, which is one of the most powerful ones when it comes to feeling what another person is going through. And interestingly, for me, empathy is what we who've been in care need to be able to feel for others as well. Because we can become very, I mean, so I speak about myself, I can become very closed, you know, like you don't know how bad it was for me, you know, and that actually is a way of imprisoning oneself. School offered me care and structure, and I really needed structure and I needed care within that structure. I've spoken to head teachers over the past 2 years throughout this country. I've been somehow been put on a list and done lots of head teacher conferences. And all I want from my teachers at my school is to be the best that they can be. Because teaching is a part of the familial structure. And as a child, going to school, parents would often say, "Oh, my child sees the teacher more than they see they see us." And there'd be a bit of jealousy inside the parents, because they're letting their child be influenced by these other adults, to be honest.
Mm.
But to a kid in care, actually, the school is as close to the parental role as there is, because the child may have been with different foster parents and different children's homes with different adults, but the one steady thing is the school, is the education. So for me, the best example of education in practice is, the best example of, what was I saying? Yes, the best example of education in practice is in the young person who's been in care. Like they are the ones who are most in need of education and who will make the most of education as well. And also, they're the ones who are going to come back to you as a teacher and say, "You helped me, you saw me." These young people in care deserve our best, because they are suffering from a prejudice which is widely, which is unchallenged in society, that there is something bad about them because they're in care, that it is somehow their fault. And they deserve your service. The people who think worst of the children in care are quite often the children in care themselves. Like, like, why would anybody expect anything of me? You know? That's what I felt anyway when I was in care. I had a teacher who said, "Oh, one day you're going to be very well known." I was like, "No, don't be stupid. Like, that's just ridiculous." Um, when something gets stolen or lost, it's us, the kids who are in care, who feel guilty. If it happens in a group of people, and I know that's a natural thing. Quite a lot of people say, "Oh yeah, I always feel," but no, we feel it really badly. Because if somebody accuses us of stealing, our entire world might fall apart. because that's the experience that we have at home. That somehow we're at fault for whatever's happened outside of us. Whether that makes logical sense, it made emotional sense to us. Sorry, I'm just trying to again contextualize the question. If the question is like, how should a child in care, how should somebody work with a child in care through their own education, through their the answer to me is to boost their confidence in themselves, because that's what you're working against, I think. And that's where I often think, be the best teacher you can be. You know what I mean? Because that's what a teacher does. It boosts the confidence of the young person who's learning. It's not just about that person getting it right. It's about the teacher understanding that that person deserves to get it right. And
Mm.
therefore, if they get it wrong, that's just a pathway to getting it right. So this is why I think that young people in care demand the best of the workers that are working with them. They are a challenge to any institution, just like Harry Potter was to Hogwarts. How can you, as an institution, be the best that you can be? Not as a social worker if you're a teacher, not as a teacher if you're as a social worker. Be the best social worker you can be. Be the best teacher you can be. And where will that be exemplified most? When you're teaching a child in care. I left care at 18 and I'd been fostered and I was in a series of children's homes. Everybody was trying to do the right thing by me. But what they didn't put together was that at 18 years of age, I didn't know anybody who knew me for longer than a year. The one thing that I realized had happened to me in care was that everybody disappeared. And even after I left care at 18 years of age, the one thing that was true was that everything had gone. And what I mean is like there was nobody calling me up who knew me from when I was 10, 12, 13. Now that is such a fundamental part of familial life that people even don't even know that it's a privilege.
Mm.
It's so close to them. They have to wait for their parents to die to feel that loss. And even then it isn't a loss because they've got somebody to relate to who that loved them. So the one thing that truly affected me when I left care was that I didn't have any relativity to the years that had gone before me. I couldn't even keep in touch with my social worker. His job was to not be in touch with me. I mean, after I left care, I was no longer, I'd been with him for 5 years. He was a good man. I was never supposed to be in touch with him again. It's crazy. This is what I mean by we ask everything of the services from our local council. I deserve to be in touch with my social worker. My social worker deserves to be in touch with me because emotionally he has to shut down
Mm.
when I leave care. Pretend that he's never had an emotional relationship with me.
Mm.
By the way, one of the most cruelest things that I was ever told in words or by actions was that a residential social worker said to me they couldn't be emotionally involved in the workload because otherwise they would have a nervous breakdown. They couldn't be emotionally involved with every single child that they worked with because otherwise they would have a nervous breakdown. That, and I want people, especially the professionals, to hold on to this. That is an emotional statement of an emotional state. Okay? If a person in the care system is saying to themselves, I can't be emotionally involved in all of my workload, otherwise, I mean, I'd have a breakdown. That is an emotional state that you are promoting to the people that you're working with. All we are is carriers of our emotional state, physical embodiments of our emotional state. Now, now, what I'm trying to say is that being able to carry your emotional state is really important, is an emotional state of itself. So being able to carry it and hold yourself within your own vulnerabilities as a professional is an emotional state and is important. But to shut down and say that you are not emotional is a lie to a child who is, and you'll know this from your own families, a child is just an emotional sucking machine. That's all they want. So that one phrase that I heard from people, you know, oh, I can't be emotionally involved in my workload, was the coldest thing that I could ever receive, both in words or in physical approach. Again, a child in care challenges your idea of what you are as a social worker, as a teacher, as a lawyer, as a everything. I mean, we have mountains to climb in our adult life once we've left care. Um, and again, we remain, I think, unseen, you know, and those skills that we have to employ as are unacknowledged. Um, but hopefully, you know, you can change that with your speech at the degree ceremony.
And that is the message I want to give, because like so many people struggle, they stress being like, oh, if I have to get the best grades so I can like do the best I can. But at the end of the day, like just passing and just getting that like that degree means that you open up the doors to so many opportunities. And like I'm like shocked in myself that I'm graduating with distinctions, just considering how much I've struggled with like my education throughout the years. But I'm also just like, I did that.